Solving quadratic equations by factorisation. You need to be able to solve quadratic equations by factorising them. We looked at factorising in one of the previous videos. A quadratic equation will have either 0, 1 or 2 solutions, which we call roots. If there is one solution, we call that a repeated root. So that's how we got to solve the equation x squared equals 9x. First thing we do, we rearrange it to make it equal 0. So x squared minus 9x is equal to 0. The second thing we do is we factorise it. In this case, there's a common factor of x. So we can take the x out as a common factor and we end up with x minus 9 is equal to 0. So we have the product of two things that is equal to 0. That must mean that one of the things must be 0 for the product to be 0. So either x or x minus 9 must be equal to 0 in order for the product to be 0. So either x is equal to 0 or x minus 9 is equal to 0. So x must be 9. Those are the two solutions, 0 and 9. X squared minus 2x minus 15 is equal to 0. Again, we can factorise. Remember, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to be 15 and add to be minus 2. So we factorise, we get x plus 3, x minus 5 is equal to 0. Again here we have the idea that we got the product of two things being equal to 0, so that must mean that one of them must be 0. So either x plus 3 is 0 or x minus 5 is 0 for the actual answer to be 0. If x plus 3 is 0, then x must be minus 3. Or if x minus 5 is 0, then x must be 5. So the two solutions are minus 3 and 5. So now let's look at solving 2x squared minus 9x minus 5 is equal to 0. Firstly, we have to factorise, but let's cast our mind back to a previous video. Because we've got 2x squared at the start, the factorisation process is slightly different. There must be a 2x at the start of one of the brackets, so it's 2x and x. That means that the two numbers, whilst they have to times to be minus 5, one of them is doubled in order to make the minus 9 in the middle. So if we're using minus 5 and 1, which times to be minus 5, then the minus 5 has to be doubled to give minus 10 plus 1 to make the minus 9. So the minus 5 has to go in the opposite bracket to the 2x. So it's 2x plus 1, x minus 5 is equal to 0. Then it's what makes each bracket equal to 0, because in order for the answer to be 0, one of the brackets must be 0. So either x is a minus a half or x is equal to 5 are the two solutions. 6x squared plus 13x minus 5 is equal to 0. Let's factorise. This time it's getting really quite tricky because we've got 6x squared at the start, so it could be 6x and x, or it could be 2x and 3x in the brackets. We're not entirely sure because either of those would give us 6x squared as needed. The numbers, however, must multiply to give minus 5 at the end, and there's not many numbers that do that. And they got to add to give 13 when combined with either the 6's or the 2's or the 3's or the whatever combine it with. So we can use all of that to puzzle out what it should be. If we use 3x and 2x at the starts of the brackets, then and the minus 1 and the 5 inside the brackets, they multiply to give the minus 5, and they will add to give the 13 if the minus 5 is tripled and the minus 1 is doubled. So that means that the plus 5 must be in the opposite bracket to the 3x, and the minus 1 must be in the opposite bracket to the 2x. So we end up with 3x minus 1, 2x plus 5 is equal to 0. You can see that whilst we can solve this by factorising, factorising can get more and more tricky as the numbers become less cooperative. And we will look in subsequent videos at other ways of solving quadratic equations that may be easier for expressions that are either difficult to factorise or impossible to factorise. To finish this example, it's now what makes the brackets equal to 0, so either 3x minus 1 must be equal to 0, so x is a third, or 2x plus 5 must be equal to 0, so x is minus 5 over 2. X squared minus 5x plus 18 equals 2 plus 3x. In this type of example, the first step is to rearrange it so we get one of the sides being equal to 0. In this case, if we subtract the 2 and then subtract the 3x, we end up with x squared minus 8x plus 16 is equal to 0. Now we can factorise it as before. This one is a nice one to factorise because it's only x squared at the start, so it's two numbers that times to be 16 and add to be minus 8. That'll be x minus 4 and x minus 4. We could of course write that as x minus 4 squared. So it's either x minus 4 is equal to 0, so x equals 4, or x minus 4 is equal to 0, or x equals 4, so in this case it's the repeated root. There's only one solution. So 2x minus 3 squared is equal to 25. In this type of example, we actually have a different way we can solve this. Because it's 2x minus 3 squared is equal to 25, we can square root both sides. When we square root 2x minus 3 squared, we're left with 2x minus 3. And when we square root 25, we get two answers, plus or minus 5. We then have to solve each of those sums. You have to solve 2x minus 3 is equal to 5, 2x is equal to 8, x is equal to 4, and we also have to solve 2x minus 3 is equal to minus 5. Add the 3 on, 2x is minus 2, x is minus 1. So the two solutions are 4 and minus 1. But we have to make sure and be careful that we do use both possible answers. X minus 3 squared is equal to 7. The same idea goes. This time, however, there will be a surd in the answer. Square root both sides. X minus 3 is plus or minus the square root of 7. So either x minus 3 is equal to root 7, so x is equal to 3 plus root 7, or alternatively, x minus 3 is equal to minus root 7, so x is equal to 3 minus root 7. Those would be the two solutions to that quadratic equation.